My oldest was 10 years old, and then my daughter was 9 years old, and my youngest was 4 years old. They were all living with me, and we were living with my sister um, when I was incarcerated. From the point that I was arrested, I wasn't allowed to have contact. Well, it was traumatic. Um, I remember in the beginning, it was physically ailing. I felt sick. But as time went on, you learned to deal with that feeling and cope. I was able to have monthly phone calls, and I got to visit my daughter twice at the end of my sentence. It felt like very little. Mostly it was them talking about school and their friends and different activities that they were involved in. The friends that I made while I was incarcerated didn't have children, so they really couldn't relate. But I did see, other women that had visits on a weekly basis regularly with their children.
How does that affect you?
Made me sad, and it was also really motivating to do the right thing when I was able to get out. When I first went into drug treatment, it wasn't because I wanted to stop using drugs. It was because, well, the first time was because I wanted to avoid prison time. And that didn't work for the judge. The judge still sentenced me to prison. So while I was incarcerated, I went through drug treatment again. And again, it wasn't because of something that I wanted to do. It was something that I knew was a requirement in order for me to see my children. So I completed treatment inside. By the time I was released and I completed a treatment outside, that time I believe it was for me. There's underlying reasons why someone chooses to use alcohol and drugs, and I was using alcohol and drugs to deal with trauma that I had experienced rather than deal with them clean and sober. And I really didn't have the skills and the tools in order to do that. Drug addicts commit crimes to feed their drug habit. But really the issue is the drug abuse. So I don't think that putting somebody in prison or locking them up in jail or prison is solving the problem. They currently have like drug court programs where first-time offenders will have to complete drug and alcohol treatment and go to court once a week and report what they've done, and that's to avoid a prison sentence. I think those are becoming more popular and hopefully helpful. The day of my release, I didn't have housing to go to, so it was either going to be to a homeless shelter or an Oxford house, and thankfully I was able to get into an Oxford house that same day. And that's where it began. And then I started looking for jobs, and a lot of places don't hire people with certain felonies or any felonies. And actually my first experience with getting a job after I got released from prison was 6 days after I got out. I applied at a hotel to be a maid, and on the question, have you ever been convicted of a felony, I marked no. I lied about it because that was probably my 50th application somewhere. So I was feeling discouraged and figured, it's just a hotel, a maid, they're not gonna really check. Well, I marked no, and they hired me. And then 2 weeks later, they fired me because they really did do a background check.
And they found out.
Right.
Yeah.
So that point on, I decided that I couldn't lie about it anymore. I had to turn that period of incarceration and those convictions on my record into a positive. And that's what I started telling employers up front. This is my record. This is what I've learned from that experience. And I was able to get some really good jobs. I worked for the state of Oregon. I worked for Pathfinders. I worked for Family Building Blocks and Bridgeway, different alcohol and drug recovery facilities. But outside of alcohol and drug facilities or any sort of peer mentor positions or counselor positions, outside of that field, it's still very difficult to find a job. They do have the ban the box now, so that requires them to look past just the application. So if you look good on the application, you get to the interview, but they could still have the policy where they don't hire felons. So it only gets you so far. So banning the box essentially wasn't enough. There's a stigma that comes with people that have been convicted of felonies or people that used to use drugs, addicts. It's a negative. And that's one of the reasons why I want to get in on the legislative process at that level, because that's where changes are going to be made, is with the laws. In my case personally, I think that if they, if 5 years have passed since this type of drug, or this type of crime I meant to say, then it should be able to come off of your record. And we do have expungement for certain crimes, but a lot of drug crimes, and like a child neglect charge and in the first degree is a Class A felony. And a lot of drug charges are Class A felonies, and those are not eligible for expungement. So they are on your record forever. You could apply for a pardon, but I've never heard of the governor actually doing that. My favorite quote, I don't know who it's from. It was anonymous on Facebook several years ago, but it is, the time has come to give up all hope for a better past. So I just thought I'd share that. It's my favorite.